Judge Faruqui was appointed as a United States Magistrate Judge on September 14, 2020. He received a BA and JD from Georgetown University. Following law school, he was a litigation associate at Willkie Farr in Washington, D.C., where he focused on government investigations and general commercial litigation. Judge Faruqui then served for 12 years as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in St. Louis and Washington, D.C. While there, he prosecuted cases involving terrorist, use of cryptocurrency, North Korean weapons, darknet sites dedicated to child exploitation, and the theft of antiquities. He also represented the Department of Justice at numerous conferences across the globe on financial crimes, cryptocurrency, and national security issues. Without further ado, Judge Faruqui.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the warm introduction. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. I had some unexpected work travel come up at the very last minute, but I am happy to still be able to take advantage of Zoom to be with you all virtually. Just to give you a little bit more background on myself, I think I appreciate the accolades or the professional achievements, but I want to just talk about who I am as a person, because I think that's more meaningful, certainly to me, and I hope as a way to connect with Rotarians. My parents immigrated to the United States many years ago. My father came to go to school at the University of Oklahoma, where he was studying engineering, and then went to get a master's degree from Oklahoma State. My mother came to the United States. Her brother was driving a bus in Chicago. The other was studying medicine, and they wanted their baby sister to come out. And so she came here. She and my father met each other here in the United States, which was uncommon for, I think, their generation to have a love marriage, not something that was arranged by a family. And after a brief period of courtship, they got married and moved to a place my mother had no intention of going to, which is Baltimore, which was I was born and raised. I am an only child. I was the only child of a family. We have a very tight-knit family. We were, when I was growing up in Baltimore, while I was in Towson, the suburbs outside of Baltimore, I was from a community that was not, I think, apparently, necessarily diverse in terms of national origin. There was only one other person at my elementary school that was from a different ethnic background, and it was challenging. When you're in elementary school, the last thing you want to do is be different. You just want to fit in with everybody else. And so an international night was always my least favorite day of the school year, because we had all these wonderful people who would come around and want to try Pakistani cuisine and see what all the different food there was that we had, and clothes and holidays that we would talk about. And I, as a Malaysian student, it was just horrible. But it was great. I appreciate it now certainly more, that the enthusiasm. So although in some ways, we were very different, we were so welcomed by our community that people really had a passion for learning about citizenship and fellowship. And I think that it paid great dividends for me as those people continue to support me. I will say, as I fast forward now, I live in Washington, D.C. I heard our speaker talking earlier. My children are first generation DC, but I hope that years from now there will be a fifth generation Washington DC native in our family. When we go to international night now at our local public school, DC public school, I don't know if I could even tell you. I am amazed by the diversity of international focus that comes in. How many people are from, not just, you don't just have like someone's bringing Indian cuisine. They're like, oh, this is North Indian. Or this is Eastern Indian from one province, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I know what that is because I go to such and such Indian restaurant. So it's really amazing to see the difference even in 35, 40 years of how open schools are and our communities are to people of different backgrounds and have embraced their cultures. Unfortunately, when I was pretty young, my father passed away, so it was just my mother and I. She's a physical therapist, and she had the very challenging job of going from being a co-parent to being a single parent overnight, unexpected. And I am very grateful, extremely grateful that she, as I've learned now, having children, it was a task that she rose immediately to the challenge. And it's a challenge of which I could not imagine that is greater. When experience profound loss and you're hurting and you need to process for yourself, but you have no time because you have a 15-year-old teenage boy with all the problems that are attendant to that, which were many, and that, he requires a lot of management. I was lucky to have my family, my uncle, one of them who originally was in Illinois, then Denver, moved to Baltimore. My grandmother also lived with us. And so it wasn't just them, though. It wasn't just the immediate family. It was my greater community, my neighbors. I always say the Vanneman family. There was, it was Mr. Vanneman, but it was also Uncle Vince and Auntie Ann. And, it was Fred and Pam, the other neighbors, everyone in the neighborhood. Uncle Bob, 2 doors down, helped me get through algebra class and calculus because he would teach me, sit down. And at the time, it just seemed completely normal to me that, a 15 or 16-year-old kid would come knock on a neighbor's door and say, hey, can you help me with my calculus homework? And would sit there for hours. But now as I look back, I am so appreciative for the sacrifices that they made. And it just, I also love, I think this is what is truly wonderful about this country is that there are organizations, right, like the Rotary Club. There were people who, they went out of their way. All I saw was our loss, but I did not see our gain. And our gain was the people around us and all of the things that they did. As I always say, people say, my fellow Americans. And, when politicians say that, it's hard sometimes to think of what's behind that. But when I say it, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. These are people who took us in. I was born in the United States, but took my parents in and adopted us and made us feel at home like a family. And so I am grateful. Always, when I talk about my fellow Americans, I am concerned when people see only division, because I think at bottom, a love for country and a love for service, that is what binds us and to our principles, and that we should not lose sight of that, because it is what truly makes this country so special. And it's why my parents came here, and that's why I'm so proud to be in public service now. So that's a little bit about me in terms of my background. I then went to law school, and after that, was a federal prosecutor. I got a chance to work on some really interesting cases while at the Department of Justice, including investigations into how North Korea used front companies to try to launder money to get funds for their nuclear proliferation program, as well as into the use of cryptocurrency, so Bitcoin, to fund the largest ever darknet child pornography site. We arrested 330 people worldwide and rescued 24 children who were being actively sexually assaulted. It was definitely the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life, or will do. It's both a great thing and a curse, I guess, to know that the best thing that you've ever done in your life, you've already done. But it was such a wonderful experience. Really, people dedicated, working all hours, night and day, in public service and putting ahead the mission above all else, to make sure that we could help rescue these victims and try to take apart this, first ever network of its kind. So I did come to the bench as a prosecutor. I'm so appreciative for Marilyn, given that she is at the Federal Public Defender's Office, that, I couldn't think of a higher compliment and an honor to have someone who is in the Public Defender's Office ask me to come in and speak to you all, because I'm hopeful that what she would say is that as my time on the bench, I've been on for about 2 years, almost 2 years exactly right now, is that I've tried to demonstrate the principles of my new job, which is different than my old job. My old job was certainly a commitment to justice. That's what being a prosecutor is about. It's not about wins and losses. I can't tell you that there is a better feeling after having been a private law firm to come to a job where it's not about, what are the things that you need to do to move the ball forward? What is the thing you need to do to make sure that this case is resolved in the way that's most favorable to your client? It's just do the right thing. And if you don't do the right thing, you've failed in your job. So it's an enormous luxury to have that. And I was really lucky to have had my time there, but it's different being a judge. And so I came to the bench since September 2020, and it was a new experience for me. I did not have in my portfolio as a prosecutor many arrest-generated cases, and so a lot of my cases were long-term investigations. I was able to successfully arrest and extradite the first ever North Korean national to the United States, where he's being prosecuted still to this day. I had that darknet case. Many of the prosecutions of the 330 arrests, many occurred overseas, in which I had no involvement other than helping to assist creating the packets of information and the documentation of who the users of the website were. So to me, this was a pretty new world. And when I got here, I had, again, a new remit, a new goal. And the goal, of course, while still to do justice, it's to follow the Constitution and the laws as always. But also, I think, there's an important part. You've heard many judges, in fact, justices even have said, is how do we weave in compassion into the job that we do? We have to follow the law. There are many times where I feel very frustrated because there are people who I often tell them the difference between them and me. Single mom, I was very sort of squarely in middle income America, middle class American family, is that I just got more chances than them. I had a lot of opportunities. I did, made foolish mistakes as young teenage boys do, but I was lucky to have good friends who, they helped me, I think, stay on a good path. I was lucky to have a ton of support from my teachers at school. I was just remembering the other day, after my father passed away, he used to drive me to and from school every day. One of my English teacher, Miss Cotter, used to pick me up every day and take me home. And again, at the time, I just thought, that's great. Of course, that's what Miss Cotter would do. But I didn't realize, again, all these little things are, sacrifices people were making. And I am now so appreciative of the things that they did. But I didn't know, certainly, as I said at the time. And, I had a lot to learn, and I'm still trying to learn, again, the idea of how do we fit compassion in for people who did not have the chances at? What happened when someone didn't have Miss Cotter to pick them up and take them home? What happened when someone didn't have Uncle Bob to help them with math homework? What happened when someone didn't have a mom like I did, who was able to, she didn't take a single day of vacation, but after the time my father died until I graduated law school, she was just so concerned that there was no margin for error and that she had to just keep focusing on what was necessary to getting me to the finish line of what she and my dad had dreamed in terms of things that I would achieve. What happens when people don't have that? When I was at the jail recently doing an education event, one of the guys there said, look, if I knew how to make legal money, I would have done that, but I didn't have anyone to give me that example. And I think it was just so striking, right? Because that's not even a term that I ever heard of, legal money, right? To me, money is just money. It's always derived legally, and then that's the default. And then the modifiers, it's illegal, right? But to him, that was just not something he'd experienced. And he was really curious. He was doing a science project, and it took him down all these other interesting paths where he'd get access to resources, and he was trying to learn about other professions and things that existed. So I'm so grateful, as I said, for Marilyn for having me here. I'm hopeful that I can answer questions about things that you might have about the judiciary. Some things I may be limited on in terms of cases that may be before me or my colleagues. But I do think that it's important. There's a famous judge who said that people know more about the CIA than they do about the judiciary. And I think that's a real problem because faith in our judicial system is steeped on trust, and trust is based on openness. And so our courts are public courts. They're open to everybody. In fact, now many of our courts can be accessed remotely. All of the D.C. district courts, that's the federal courthouse where I work, and in fact, where many hearings involving sensitive political issues that you'll see in the news have come up. Virtually all the hearings are broadcast on a public phone line, access line, where you can dial in anytime and listen in, and I encourage you to do that. We've had more and more proceedings in person as well. The courthouse is open. I would encourage people to come, of course, be safe, follow the guidelines that have been promulgated in order to stay safe, but that we're able to socially distance, and you're able to observe proceedings. And I'm hopeful that you will see what I see every day, which is a community of incredibly dedicated public servants. It's not just the judges. I would hope, and I do believe that we are dedicated public servants, but we have the luxury of getting to sit in the big chair, wear as I like to say, my Halloween costume every year, and talk to people about things that profoundly affect their lives every day. But it's not just us. It's the courtroom deputies, it's the clerk's office staff, it's the lawyers, the law clerks who sit and work with us. It's the court reporters, people who every day are making small sacrifices that you may not see otherwise to ensure the fair administration of justice, because that is our job, and making sure people have access to justice. It's the defense lawyers. It's not just the federal public defenders, who absolutely are making tremendous sacrifice to be there, but it's also defense lawyers who come and give us their time to be court-appointed counsel. It's when we have people come in as third parties to come in and serve as custodians when we want to release somebody out into the community, but they have to be in home incarceration. People are volunteering their time in their services to the court and the mission that we are trying so hard to work for. It's incredibly uplifting. Even in some of the saddest cases, you still have the opportunity to see people trying their best to do the right thing and help people out. And that's pretty wonderful. So a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in the courthouse now, I'd like to highlight in terms of what happens after people are incarcerated. So I'm going to work from the back end, and then we'll work our way backwards in the timeline. So when people finish their time of federal incarceration, which is generally mandated by statute. So we're setting aside cases where someone has a mandatory minimum. Not many cases do have that, but the vast majority do not. And so then you do about 85%, no matter what, you're going to do 85% of your time. So if you have a 10-year sentence, you would have 85% of that time, and then you're let out, you're 15% to begin with, this good credit time. Now, problems happen or things when you're incarcerated, perhaps it'll get the full time or it could be extended, but generally speaking, 85% of your time you're sentenced to, you get out. There's no federal probation, so people do not get out for good behavior. There's no probation commission that's looking at that anymore. It's 85%, you're out, and then you're on federal supervision. Now, the United States Probation Office supervises people on federal supervision, and the court, the federal judges, the district judges, are monitoring if there are violations, decide whether a person will be revoked and brought back into custody, or else whether or not they will, after which they will be, maybe their period of supervision extended or new conditions of release will be put into place. One of the things that our court has innovated is that we have what's called a reentry court. It's a court where people who are high risk, we take 12 to 15 of the highest risk people to recidivate. We bring in and surge resources. And so I'm so excited to be connected with the Rotary Club because it's primarily community partners. So Catholic Charities plays a big part. We have a couple local universities that play a part. And these are folks who frequently have not had any legal employment in their lives. They have mental health issues. They're struggling to find housing and they're struggling to find employment. But what we do is that we try to bring collaborators from the communities as well as from access to federal resources to help them on their path to get their feedback. I always say when we're in reentry court, one of the things I say is that you wouldn't take someone who hasn't swam for a decade, drop them in the middle of the ocean, put weights on them, and then be surprised if they drown. And that's what would happen with these guys. We had one woman this past year, and she was our best student by far and away. But that's what happens to many of them, is that they don't have the support services that they need. And so we work with community partners as well as, again, resources that we've been able to plug into through the federal government, as well as local resources through this city government, D.C., the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens, to make sure that people get access to resources that will be of value to them and useful to them as they try to get housing, employment, and mental health resources. So I hope that we can partner with the Rotary Club and find ways. Those are all Zoom hearings, and so you can participate from the convenience of your home at any time. And it's, again, a public hearing. You can come in. It is the best thing that happens in our courthouse when we do it. It's usually the second or third Thursday of the month. It changes. We haven't started next class in October, so I'll be sure to link up with Marilyn and let you all know about that. But it's called Rebuilding Our Lives, a roll court. It is the best thing that you will see. You will see people who have tremendous challenges and they take responsibility for what they did. They don't shy away from the fact that they committed a mistake. They had to be punished for it, but that they want to do better by themselves, for not only themselves, but frequently their family and the community, and how they can give back. We've had a lot of gun violence in Washington, D.C. Many of them said, look, it's great that the judges and the lawyers and the FBI agents want to tell us that this is bad, but it's on us. This is our community. So they went and set up an event at a local park where they just invited young kids to come in, young guys, and just want to talk about that. We had a Keeping It Real event that the mayor's office had recently, which was, the real was REEL, and it was a fishing event. And so we were down at the Anacostia Park and invited people to come out, returning citizens, people who are returning back to society and trying to get them again habituated back to being part of society. It's hard. It requires a lot of work and preparation, but we have those resources, and we have the people with the capital that are willing to teach them, right? The emotional capital, the time capital to go in there and teach them how do you get back to being a productive or start being a productive member of society. So rebuilding our lives court, the reentry court is just something that's very important to the what I get an opportunity in the courthouse, and I hope that you all would take the chance to observe it and see what I see, that it's truly inspirational. I'll next pivot quickly, and then happy to answer question answers, is work inside the courthouse. And so the Washington Post was really nice and did a great write-up on a program we had recently with our MIT scholars. And so I contacted MIT when I read that they had, due to pandemic, again, the benefits of Zoom, they'd started teaching last year for the first time ever a class on computer coding. And this is a MIT class. And while I love Georgetown, my alma mater, I will say that was the hardest class that I took, the worst grade I got. And this was something else, right? These are the MIT PhD candidates, so truly some of the smartest people, I think, in our country when it comes to computer coding. And they were able to start a class, and it's like a real college 101 class. So much of what happens in incarceration is you're limiting people's exposure, and you have to do that for public safety reasons. But they're very limited. They may not know people outside of their own quadrant, let alone on different floors. In the DC jail, we have two divisions. There's the CTF and CDF. They may never speak to someone in the other side. So with this class with MIT is students from CTF, CDF, a women's jail in New England, as well as another jail. And the three of them, they get together like a big, 101 coding class, and there's 50 of them in the room, and with security. So we have prison staff who are working and watching them each as they're on their Zoom computer, but they're chatting with each other and saying, and publicly, hi, how you doing? Oh, I'm so-and-so. And they love this because it's an opportunity again to broaden their world while still keeping them in a place for public safety reasons or for deterrence reasons for future, as we think of punishment, that they're having their exposure limited. And so it was incredible how rewarding it was for them, how motivating it was for them. And then after that, they had breakout sessions where they would go and get usually 3 students to 1 MIT graduate student get training about the particular lessons they were learning that day. The idea is we're trying to provide 21st century skills for these folks. Virtually everyone in that jail is going to be released sooner or later. And so the question is, when they're released, and this is I believe, a political issue, what are we doing to prepare them to succeed so that the state does not have to have extraneous costs, right? Supervision is expensive. Incarcerating people is expensive. It is far more efficient to train them with skills that will allow them to succeed and get that legal money so that they are not clogging back up the criminal justice system. So setting aside the equity and compassion issues, it's purely economics. If nothing else, that's how I will appeal to people always and say, look, let's talk about the money. And let's talk about, we don't need to talk about philosophical ideas of right and wrong, but let's simply talk about the economics of this and public safety. Because at bottom, isn't that what the criminal justice system is about? We want to increase public safety and having people educated, having them have 21st century skills, having them have the confidence so that when they come out of prison, they don't think of themselves only as a felon or returning citizen, a convict, but they think of themselves as an MIT scholar. What that does for their self-esteem, I got to see that firsthand, what it meant to the guys. These are the things that if we can do, I think that it can profoundly affect the criminal justice system. We have a lot of other classes we're teaching, Georgetown University. I'm so proud of them as an alumni. I think it's the most important thing they're doing. They've started an incredible program with Mark Howard there, where they go and teach, again, high-level Georgetown classes to students there. They call it the Southeast Campus of Georgetown. It's in the DC jail. And they started a graduate program, a actual degree-bearing program at the jail in Cumberland, Maryland. So that's a little bit about the work that I'm doing right now in the jail system, as well as outside of it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Judge. Very much appreciate your being able to talk to us today. You've talked a lot about the criminal justice system. We often hear judges lament the disappearance of the civil jury trial. Can you tell us how many civil jury trials approximately were conducted in the District of Columbia in the last year, and how much time are judges actually spending on the bench in trial over the course of a year? Thanks.
Sure. Well, we're now the busiest our court has ever been in its history, in part because we have so many January 6th trials that have occurred or are occurring right now as we speak. We have actually had several civil jury trials recently in the courthouse. I think we're probably at 4 in the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 months. As you know, I'm sure well know, most of the federal cases, including the criminal cases, the vast majority do in fact settle. We have a robust mediation program that's free to any participants, as both attorneys who volunteer their time to the circuit mediator program, but as well as judges, magistrate judges like myself who participate in it to try to help people resolve their matters short of trial. We do have, though, I do think probably a fair amount compared to other districts, more so civil trials. Some of that's because of the litigation that occurs in DC with agencies. There's, not always the same sort of institutional equities that two individual or corporate clients would have when you have a government entity that may have, sort of a impossibility of settling a case, because this is a, decision by a political decision, not, sometimes frequently settling is a emotional and a financial decision. But we have had quite a few civil trials. Obviously, during the pandemic, things were very limited in terms of what we could do in in-person proceedings. But as I said, we're the busiest we've ever been now. So we have many, many trials that are occurring as we speak. We have also been able to leverage Zoom to do a lot of things. People have opted for bench trials. The Northern District of California and some other courts have actually spoken, the judges there have spoken about doing civil jury trials by Zoom, and they have found it to be effective. I don't believe we've had any judges who've done it in DC, but I think it is, I was supposed to have recently a civil jury trial on a medical malpractice claim involving the VA and settled the morning of trial. But we had it was going to be a bench trial, but one of the litigants was in Costa Rica. He said he'd moved to Costa Rica during the pandemic. And, so it was incredibly convenient for him to be able to continue by Zoom. So I do think Zoom will provide us opportunities, hopefully, to allow for more courtroom efficiency and greater access to the court.
Thanks, Judge.
Judge Faruqui, there's a big issue right now on cash bonds and getting rid of them. Can you explain a little bit about how it doesn't exist in federal court, and if you think we should get rid of cash bonds in general?
Sure. So I know it's a little hard to hear online, but I was able to pick it up. Thank you. So the question was about cash bonds, that whether or not they're cash bonds in federal court and whether or not cash bonds are a good idea. This is certainly a very topical issue. There's been a lot of questions in the state court system about whether or not cash bonds can be continued because for the very concern that, we should not incarcerate poverty, right? We incarcerate based on the presumption in certain cases of detention when there's a crime for which someone is presumed to be detained, but they still have an opportunity to show not, or we incarcerate because there's no other alternative, right? The law is very clear. The Bail Reform Act says it's extraordinary circumstance to detain someone pre-trial. Now, that being said, we do detain many people pre-trial because frequently in federal court, we have extraordinary cases that can pose a grave danger. But we do not have cash bonds in federal court. And it's frustrating to me because I've seen journalists report, including on the January 6th cases, and they're shocked to see that people are being let out without cash bonds. And they talk about how in their state court system, they see that all the time. For better or for worse, we do not have cash bonds. I think the idea is, again, when someone is presumed innocent, we do not want to bring into that. We have already appointed them counsel if they can't afford it. We don't want to make a barrier to their release when the law directs release based on income issues and concerns about income equity. Whether it's a good idea or not, I can't certainly speak to policy issues. I have to stick kind of to my lane of following the laws that's dictated. But I think that, the law certainly in DC and our practice is self-evident that we think that it's not something, and as most federal courts do not think it's a good idea, and we instead focus on making conditions. So removing internet access is something that we do. Having a third-party custodian be there 24/7. Using ring cameras to see who's coming in and out of house. Removing bedroom doors so someone does not have any privacy in their house. Finding ways to incarcerate people at home and home incarceration instead of having direct financial burdens. Finding other ways to make sure that they are still keeping the community safe, but allowing them to be outside of incarceration while they're presumed innocent.
So you spoke about criminal justice in a way that I really haven't heard before. I'm a person who works in social services, so I immediately heard you talking about community. Can you talk a little bit about the way that your neighbors supporting you and your family when you were going through a time of hardship impacted the way that you see criminal justice as a component of community?
Absolutely. So the question was, in case anyone couldn't hear online, I'm going to leave the nice things that were said about me. I'm not going to repeat that, but thank you. But the question was about how did my experiences with community shape how I think about criminal justice, and not just criminal justice, even in the civil system. When we have, civil litigants come in, we're always, I'm trying to think about, again, my primary objective is, and my mission is to follow the law. I have to do that. If I can't do that, I can't do my job. But, it's not as simple as a sort of mathematical equation, 2 + 2 is 4. We're not getting that. We're getting art, right? And we're trying to see that. And everyone views art differently. And I bring my life experiences to bear when I am trying to make predictive decisions, right? Because I'm trying to decide on the detention decision, is someone going to, the DC Circuit actually had a case, and they talked about, you have to think about not just the hypothetical. Well, is there a real scenario in which someone is going to do something that is violent and that to which there's no alternative other than incarceration. So that's the law that I have to follow that, but it involves predicting the future. And Karnak, I am not, right? So I can't tell you what's going to happen. I just do my best guess, and certainly as you indicate, life experiences come into that. But what I've seen is that when someone has community support, as I did, I think that can change the arc of what's going to happen in the future. And so what I do in my courtroom is I take time. I take the time to bring in family members, neighbors, and say, how can you support this person? How will you be available? What can you do? How can I burden you so that this person is not incarcerated? And I have been constantly amazed by the sacrifices people are willing to make for not just their immediate family, but for friends and neighbors. And so, yeah, it does root back to my experience and my community, because again, those were things I took for granted. And I find that if you're willing to ask people to help their fellow Americans, they are. But a lot of times we just don't know how to. There's so many people who don't know how to help people who are struggling with finding opportunities for housing or employment, or struggling with mental health issues. They don't know how to access them. We have so many people. Again, this is what organizations like the Rotary Club are to do, is to be the interlocutors, to find those people who want to lift up their fellow Americans, but actually get them access to those in need. And so I think it's part of my job, right? That's what we do in reentry court, is to find partners, be they inside or outside of public service, and say, here's someone who needs help. You asked for it. You wanted an opportunity. I am giving you that. I'll serve it up to you. And will you take it? I think on the flip side, it means also thinking about, what did that mean for that person who did not have that opportunity until that time? Because if they didn't have that opportunity, how does that factor into my analysis? Because now that we are A, getting them the opportunities, perhaps they'll make better decisions. And B, how can we be compassionate about what happened? In some instances, that means I still detain them. I went to the jail on a gun violence program we did there, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, "Judge, you may not remember me." And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't. I see literally dozens of people a week when I'm on criminal duty, if not more. And so I'm sorry." And he said, "No, that's okay." He's like, I had a case and you actually detained me. And so I was very nervous, that he was going to say, and I'm so frustrated that you did that. I can't believe it. And he just said, "I wanted to thank you." And I got a little emotional. I just said, "It's not what I was expecting you to say." And he said, "Yeah, but you took the time to talk to me. You told me that this doesn't define who I am and that I have a future." It's like, now I'm in this science program class, and I'm actually taking another class that you are working with here. I'm in the Georgetown program. And it's like, I'm going to do things with my life, but having a judge say this, that I could be different, this wasn't who I was, that meant a lot to me. Now, that is a level of maturity and thoughtfulness that I aspire to have. Because if I was incarcerated, I'd be incredibly frustrated and angry, even if I knew I deserved to be there, I would still be pretty bitter about it. And so I admire this person, that they could rise above their circumstances. And I try to take that as inspiration for me to connect with people in my courtroom and make sure we have one rule, as I always tell my law clerks in the courtroom: I will not rule. I can't promise I'm going to rule in people's favor. In fact, frequently I don't, but I will promise that they'll have the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Judge Faruqui. And Sarah, if you could pull up the certificate on behalf of the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. I am pleased and proud to present you in recognition of your appearance before us. It's Trees for the Capital certificate, signifying our commitment to plant a tree in your honor to improve and beautify the environment. And we will plant a tree in your honor, and we will send you those GPS coordinates so you can know exactly where your tree is. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That's an incredible honor. Thank you. I'm so, again, appreciative to be here, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch and hoping to find opportunities to collaborate.